Welcome to Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson. This is the podcast dedicated to first responder mental health, helping police, fire, EMS, dispatchers, and paramedics create better growth environments for themselves and their teams. Let's get started.
Frayed.ai. You heard me talk about it. I'm going to keep on talking about it because I love it. I've had about a year and a half, 18 months practice with it, and I still enjoy it. And it saves me time and it saves me energy. Frayed.ai takes your note, makes what you're talking with a client, just press record. And it does either transcript, it does a subjective and an objective with a letter if needed for your client and for whoever might need it. So for $99 a month, it saves me so much time that it's worthwhile. And if you do it for a whole year, guess what? You get 10% off. More importantly, this is what you got to remember because you are my audience that listens to Resilience Development in Action. If you do listen to this and you want to use Frayed.ai, put in the code STEVE50 in the promo code area, STEVE50, and you will get $50 off in addition to everything we just talked about. Get freed from writing your notes. Get freed from even writing your transcripts. Use that to your advantage. Frayed.ai, a great service. Go to getfrayed.ai and you will get one of the best services that will save you time and money. And I highly encourage you to do so. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 241. If you haven't listened to episode 240, it was with Morgan Yaskis. Now I know how to pronounce her name properly. It's really great. She worked on a mobile crisis team. She did the co-response up in Alaska, no less, which is a nice little challenge and a half. But please go back and listen to that. But this episode, it's interesting because people contact you. I get contacted a lot for coming on to the show. And, you know, I will not lie. I did not read her whole book. I cheated. I looked around for a couple of ideas. So hopefully one day I will actually get to the book because, you know, it's one of 27 that we all have to read. But this one I really think is going to be helpful, particularly for you fixers out there. The book is called Serial Fixer, Break Free from the Habit of Solving Other People's Problems. And I am honored to have Leah Marone. Is that correct? Or Marone?
Yeah.
Oh, I got it right the first
Marone,
time.
you nailed it. You got it.
French Canadian in me sometimes kicks in, but Leah Marone, welcome to Resilience Development in Action.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, I've always prided myself never to lie to my audience, so I'd love to say that I had a chance to read the book. It's in my pile. I swear that it's on the pile. It's just, unfortunately, you know how it is in this field where you work as a mental health counselor, but I will definitely read it. And the few things that I read online, then you can get that book anywhere. You can go check it out if you want to. But if you go check out online, I read a few things out of it and it was so amazing. And I think this is perfect for my audience. But now I feel like I'm selling you before you even talk about yourself, Leah. So Leah, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, well, thanks, Steve. I'm excited to be here and for our conversation today. I'm a psychotherapist and I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I specialize in anxiety disorders. I actually work with first responders pretty commonly. I have a few on my caseload right now. I also do mental wellness consulting for nonprofits and educators and corporate America on just how to integrate wellness and mental health and boundary setting and burnout prevention and all of those things into, teams. And so I kind of have this balance, I like to say, of just kind of the intimacy of individual therapy along with then working with teams and companies and organizations. So it's been wonderful, but all under the umbrella of mental health.
Well, I think that, I think mental health and coaching go well together, first and foremost. And sometimes people can't tell the difference, but we've talked about it multiple times in this podcast. Maybe we can just give a quick definition of the difference, if you don't mind, because being a psychotherapist is way different than being a coach.
Right. And I do. And I'm not a coach. I don't have, kind of a coaching license. I'm a psychotherapist. I have my clinical license, which, yes, that is kind of creating that space where you are helping people identify patterns. You're helping them identify, family dynamics, the relationships that they're drawn to, that they have a hand in creating and nurturing, and just behavioral patterns. And oftentimes, we really like to go into the internal boundaries that maybe we're lacking, or the lack of self-awareness, the certain coping mechanisms, things that we do to shield ourselves, protect ourselves, that ultimately, I think in psychotherapy, we really try to tap into, we try to gain more of an understanding with, we try to not completely dismiss, but we try to align and work with these parts of us so that we can build a relationship with ourselves in a healthy way. And then that transmits, I think, to healthy external relationships. So it's using a past as data, but not getting stuck there. It's, a lot of times I think psychotherapy and just therapy in general and clinicians get this bad rap of like, oh, you're just completely stuck in the past. You're helping people stay stagnant in their past traumas and their past, all this negativity. And it's like, no, that's our data. That's our story, along with the strengths and the resilience we've built along the way. But we use that then to kind of, springboard us into making better decisions, exercising presence, and really, letting the best parts of us shine as we move forward and take risks and build healthy relationships. Where I think kind of coaching and consulting, and I call myself more of a consultant because I'm not doing therapy. Of course, I have that background, but I'm not doing therapy when I show up and work with teams and corporations and nonprofits. But it's more so asking those types of questions that, we use in psychotherapy, that we use in therapy and counseling. And I know coaches do as well, where you're not taking false ownership. You are not helping, you're not taking ownership of people's problems. You're supporting and not solving, and really helping build kind of empowerment and allowing people get their repetitions in without fixing and solving.
Well, thank you for explaining that. And being a consultant is definitely different. Probably the right word I should have used. And the other thing, too, that I emphasize with my first responders, particularly that health insurances typically cover it, is also those wellness visits. I think that it's so key to get through what we need to do, because wellness is misunderstood also in my experience. I think wellness, people are like, oh, so I'm unwell. No, that's not what wellness means. It just means something else. Do you want to talk about it a little bit? Because I tell my guys all the time, but they tend to get, I don't know, maybe they're bored out of me. But if you can explain it a little bit of what wellness is, because I think it's misunderstood a lot.
Right. I mean, think about it too as just being in physical shape. Like if you haven't ran for 10 years and you want to, this upcoming weekend run a marathon, good luck. I mean, that's a heavy load. And that's something that as humans, we need the mind body connection. We need the reps. We need to build the stamina. We need to train our bodies and our minds to be able to do something like that. And I like to think of, we think of physical health and we know we got to get our reps in, and we have to rebuild when we've taken some time off. But think about our emotional health the same way. We have to get our reps in. We have to be in shape. And many of us are out of shape when it comes to those self-check-ins, when it comes to, connecting with ourselves. And then when we do have this moment where we're going on vacation, where we have this moment to pause, where we're very excited to be present somewhere, we're out of shape. We don't know how to integrate that in. And so when you think about just overall wellness, you think about self-care, it really requires, just like our physical health, kind of that consistency and getting your reps in. And I think one of the biggest things I've noticed, particularly with first responders and people that are so savvy when it comes to entering an environment, entering a space, dealing with people. And really, I mean, you're so attuned and to be 5 steps ahead and assessing things very quickly, which is a superpower in my mind. But it's hard to turn that off. You're at a very high gear all the time, because that's a necessity for your job. But you can see that transitioning out of that into other roles that you occupy is probably incredibly challenging. And so when I think a lot about even just self-care, wellness, just maintenance overall, it is, those trips to the gym, it is, certain things, but it doesn't require a ton of time and money. And I really love to tell people that, something that is built into every single one of our days is transitions. And what I mean by that is even just transitioning room to room, transitioning from, where you work to home, walking to the mailbox, all of these things are transitions, some of them longer and some of them shorter. But we're so conditioned now to clutter these, to consume during these times, whether we're on our devices, checking, did anyone email me in the past 30 seconds? Okay, is there something I can be productive with? Can I get ahead? Can I alleviate myself later so then I can relax, but I know I'm going to clutter that anyway? And so oftentimes it's training ourselves to capitalize and use these transitional times of the day and view them as micro resets, view them as times where we can get in shape with being present, scanning our five senses, getting in touch and being, kind of really in sync with our current environment. We're out of shape with that. And so that right there clears clutter, lets air out of our internal balloon, if you will. And I think it's a wonderful way to practice shifting gears, shifting roles, and just that overall maintenance of self-connection that many of us are lacking.
Well, in that short, minute or so that you were talking, I have like 4 other questions that came up. And I come prepared. I swear to God, people, I always have questions, but now she brought up so many great things. I'm going to keep one of them because I think it's very important to talk about this. Maybe after something we talked about consistency. I think wellness and consistency go hand in hand. The other thing that comes up with consistency is I'm going to come back to the real issue after that. But when you talk about consistency, I think about it as self-care. I think that most people tend to forget about self-care on a regular basis. I can talk about this a whole lot, and first responders, as soon as they heard self-care, I'm pretty sure they kind of I lost on my audience, and that's exactly what I don't want, because I think that self-care is a lot more than what people think. Getting my hair shaved, yes, I have a bald head for those of you who've never been on YouTube, but that's not maintenance. That's maintenance. That's not self-care. It's something I got to do so that I feel good, or that I don't feel uncomfortable having a haircut I never wanted. But maybe it's good to talk about a bit of self-care and how we define it and how we can help people go in there, particularly for first responders. With self-care, they think that it's, either going to the bar and getting, 30 rack with the boys after a hockey game, or they sometimes think of it as this go to a spa and sit there and get a facial, which both of them I don't think is necessarily self-care, but could be. But I like to hear what you think about self-care.
Yeah. I think one of the defining things that really, really, I guess, defines self-care is that it's not multitasking. You're present with something, and you're able to, again, get in shape with kind of being where you are and what you're focused on. And many of us are multitasking during times that we categorize as self-care. So we're kind of missing the benefit of it. It's also not kind of a Band-Aid, a pacifier, or a distraction. You kind of mentioned sometimes you go to the bar, for example. It's like we're working hard, we're going, and then we let everything pile up and we need this massive release. And we're kind of caught in this all or nothing cycle. And it's kind of, when you really take a step back, it's, am I doing something to alleviate something that I don't want to actually face in a way that's going to benefit me in the long run? It's really reaching for those quick distractions, those quick numbing agents that I think sometimes get us into more trouble later. And again, it's not saying never do something, but I think it's just being cognizant and aware of what are my patterns? Am I kind of in this all or nothing mentality where I can't shift gears naturally? I need something to completely numb me in order to feel something different and escape. And I think many of us find ourselves in that chapter. And I think it is just kind of, it's not shaming, it's not criticizing, it's taking that data and acknowledging that many people, especially in this field, have fierce inner critics. We have a critic within us often, pushing us when there is something that we might do for ourselves, when there is something that might, constitute as a boundary, and saying, no, I'm not able to do that. That critic is front and center saying, well, if you don't, then are you really passionate about your work? Are people going to think this about you? Is this selfish because you're not doing this? Are you not doing that? We have to contend with that part. And I think that's the part that we try to shove down. It gets really loud. And then we kind of reach for those distractions, which sometimes in the long run really don't benefit us at all.
I don't think it could ever benefit us yet. I think that, the whole imposter syndrome, I have one of my clients who call it the gremlins. I'm sure that you have your own name for it, but I think that they're all there. And, when you're not doing the self-care, you're going to be like, well, you're taking care of yourself. You get critical of yourself. You talk about presence. I think that one of the things that is misunderstood about being a in a self-care method, I like to even do presence in something simple like a podcast. So this is not on right now. See, I keep
Hmm.
pressing on the button, it's not on.
Hmm.
Why? Because I want to be present with Leah. I don't want to be like looking at my phone while she's talking to me, making sure this is done while this is done. I think that that's what I tell people is that sometimes it's also like if you want to do some self-care, be present for your friend. Don't check your texts while you're talking to them. Don't go to email. Don't go cooking. Don't go do other stuff. Just be present with your friend. And the best relationships I've had with my friends are over 39 years now. Can't believe I'm saying that. That dates me a little bit. But my friends, we just get on the phone and we chat. No one's checking their email. No one's watching a hockey game or football game or whatever. We're just with each other. And then an hour and a half later, we're like, holy crap, that went fair. And to me, talking about self-care, sometimes just being present for someone that you actually care and adore. That's what I try to do, but that's part of it. But you brought up another thing that I want to bring up is self-care like if I'm a first responder, if I do self-care, I can't drink, right? I can't do, oh, okay. No, really? Oh, I like the face. If you go on YouTube, I loved her face. That was perfect. Because I explain to people like you can, some people can handle their alcohol. Good for them. I can't. I can't have more than one drink at a time. And if I have more than one drink at a time, the asshole comes out, and that's not a good thing.
Hmm.
But self care is not drinking, in my opinion. Using substances is kind of like a band aid over a
Hmm.
bullet hole, for to use good language for people can understand. If I asked you for an example of self care, what would you call a good self care method? So let's say for a police officer getting off his, he's got first shift. He's got to get home. He's got to go take care of his kids because his wife needs a little, or, we can always reverse this to men and women. I'm not
Hmm.
trying to be sexist here. And I think that what do we do for self-care prior to taking care of the kids, for example? How do we handle that? Because a lot of people don't understand that you need that transition in order to be successful.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I think, it's really, and this is going to take practice, just like anything. Think about the analogy of getting in shape, because, when you start to kind of practice self care, you capitalize on transitions, you take a moment to look inward, whatever it is for you, take a moment of pause. It probably the first several times will generate some discomfort, might even trigger some anxiety. Just like if you hadn't ran for years and you go out and run, you're going to feel that. You're going to feel that discomfort. Your body's going to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And your mind might be doing the same thing, but to stick with it and build that internal muscle. And I like to look at it as, whether you kind of think about, well, I don't have time for self care. Think about bookending your day. Think about having an AM bookend and a PM bookend, just starting there. And so, what I mean by that is, even when you are doing the things that hopefully most of us are doing on a regular basis, like brushing our teeth, showering, those good things, it's refraining from having your phone out, listening to podcasts, doing this, packing your lunch, walking the dog, or drinking your coffee, all these things at once. So there's a sliver of your morning, a sliver of your evening that you can just stamp as yours, where you are present. You're practicing kind of like feeling what whether you're in the shower and executing your five senses, just connecting with yourself. That is a great way to start to kind of clear your internal clutter, to start your day off with kind of that touch point with yourself. And again, it doesn't have to be this elaborate workout, this elaborate, moment. You have to get up at 5 a.m. now. Most of you might probably are anyway, but it's just tweaking some of the things that you're doing to really practice that presence, practice that data collection, if you will. I really think that transitioning when you're done with your shift and you've been in a very high gear and you've been, really there to create space, serve, problem solve, troubleshoot, all the things for people, and you're transitioning home into a different role, whether it's a parental role, your partner, whatever it is, we miss that opportunity to almost debrief ourselves, whether we do that with a colleague, a teammate, whatever, even with ourselves, just kind of scanning like what worked well, what didn't, what's this kind of, do I have an emotional hangover? What's going to visit me at 2 a.m. tonight? Just thinking about proactively some of these things and having that moment where you debrief, it really does help you transition, kind of get a little bit of closure before you move into now I'm dad, now I'm mom, now I'm, a wife, husband, whatever it is. It really helps and makes a difference rather than flying by the seat of your pants and moving into a role where your balloon's already full.
Oh, full and exhausted,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not like there's so many things. You talked about bookending the day. I talk about sleep hygiene as being the number one priority for self-care. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter what people do, a shower, read a book. I no devices is the only advice I give,
Mm-hmm.
but anything that takes care of them. I have a 30-minute routine that people laugh about, but my
Mm.
30-minute routine, like I put my head on the pillow, the next thing I know, the alarm, well, maybe sometimes I got to get up in the middle of the night to, you know, do what I need to do. But otherwise, I hit my head on the pillow and I'm like out
Yeah.
because of that sleep hygiene. I think that that's a good way to talk about bookending your day. One of the things you mentioned earlier, which I want to bring back to this, because it's also the boundaries and it's bookending your day with some self care, is micro resets.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what people don't understand is that micro resets can take 30 seconds to a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to get a pillow like you talked about running the marathon. You don't need to get a Buddhist pillow and do it for 8 hours or
Mm-hmm.
go do a whole Tai Chi or whatever. You can do those in small moments. You talked about micro resets. I think that's key because it's not only good for what we talked about boundary setting, but it's also a good way to just deal with self care. Can you
Mm-hmm.
define it a little more about what micro resets can look like, how you define it, stuff like that?
Sure, sure. And it is like just a perfect example, I think, is, for if I use myself, I think I found myself at every red light, every red stoplight that I was at, I would pull out my phone and just be like, oh, is there a news update? Did someone text me? What's going on? It was almost this like automatic, like I couldn't sit in a space for 10 seconds or 30 seconds at a red light. I had to have some sort of like distraction or some, to convince that critic in me, like, oh, you're being productive. This is great. You're being productive. And I really called myself out on it. And I was like, you know what? Every red light that I'm at now, I don't know how many I'm going to be at in a given week, but these are times where I need to train myself to just stop and look around and just notice. I could be at the same intersection dozens of times a month, but I'm always going to see something different. I'm going to notice the trees they're changing. I'm going to notice this. And just collecting that data around me and taking a moment to pause and take advantage of that pause really has made a difference. And I've started to integrate that into, when you're transitioning down the hallway, you're eating your lunch. Some days we are multitasking, we have to, but the days that you have an opportunity to just be present with what you're doing, it really does kind of ignite you, pulls you out of that urgency, gear, even if it's for 30 seconds or, 15 minutes. And it really does help us connect not only with ourselves, but just our environments, which right now we have a lot of competition for.
I smiled talking about, the 30-second to a minute at the light and all that. I smiled a lot because I think that that's part of what your book is about too, and what people tend to do in the first responder world. Well, I have 30 seconds. What can I fix?
Mm-hmm.
And well, you don't need to spend every 30 seconds to fix things. Sometimes you got to fix yourself. I mean, whether they say about the plane, put your mask on yourself before helping out others, right? I wonder if that fixer mindset, shows up at red lights apparently for you, but for some other people, for particularly first responders, I think that they show up in a different way. How does it show up for them in general?
Yeah. Well, it is. I think it's, when you are speaking with someone and someone kind of shares, a hurdle, something difficult they're going through, there's some emotion involved in the interaction. And, we're so conditioned sometimes because of what we do, the state of urgency, especially first responders, your role oftentimes is to fix and solve, like to get people safe, to do this, X, Y, and Z. But when it comes to other relationships, you're out of the heat of the moment and someone sharing something, could be your child, could be your partner, could be a friend, whoever. And your brain is conditioned and automatically goes into grabbing ownership of that situation, comes from a good place to soothe them, perhaps, but also soothe your own discomfort and confirm that you're a good friend, you're a good colleague, you're whatever. But once we immediately go into that role of fixing and solving with the little bit of information that we've received from that person, we're jumping the gun. We're taking ownership. We are not, many of us claim to be good listeners, but
What's
we're
that?
not. I said, many of us claim to be good. Oh, yeah. I was like, did I just come out? That was
Sorry, the
awesome. That
asshole
was
came
awesome.
out. Sorry,
I
the
love it.
asshole came out.
No, I love it. You caught me. But yeah, we're then conditioned to jump in and fix and solve. And so I think the whole motto and something everyone can kind of practice with is, in your relationships, particularly even personal ones, so that you don't have this carryover effect, is support, don't solve. How do I show up and I
Perfect.
support and I'm still there with compassion and I'm not leaving people hanging, but I'm not jumping in with, oh, just do this, or oh, when this happened to me 3 years ago, or hey, button it up and feel better so I can feel better. It's refraining from that fix and solve mentality, because I think that's one of the biggest things I've seen with people with high levels of EQ, high levels of empathy and compassion, people that are so quick to be able to troubleshoot things. They're carrying this over in every single relationship and kind of creating these codependencies, these imbalances. And people are then relying on you, whether they know it or not, to fix and solve, structure everything. And we lose ourselves in the shuffle. And you can see that that's one of the main ingredients with the setup and how we show up in relationships and interactions as cyclical exhaustion. It's burning us out on top of the stress of your job. That's a high intensity rate of burnout.
I mean, I can't tell you how much I agree with so many things you just said. One of the things that shout out to my clients listening, because some, I know some do. Some get annoyed with me because sometimes I'll say, do you want me to support you or you want me to give you some ideas to change this?
Mm-hmm.
And some of them like, I want both. I'm like, no, sorry, you didn't pay for both. But I joke around with them, of course. But, support don't solve is a great word, because in your personal life, I mean, people don't want, like, I don't know you well, Leah, but I'm sure if I had a problem, I could call you. You're not going to try to fix it for me. You're just going to listen to me. I think that that's what's lost, because first responders are fixers. Let me add a layer to it too. What I loved about working on a crisis team in the first responder world is that you solve the problem very quickly. However, sometimes, again, going back to the analogy of we put a Band-Aid over a bullet hole. And I think that that's the other part too. I think that what fixers mindset in the first responder community, they, I know they want the long term. I'm not shitting on them for that. But I'm saying that, okay, I fixed the problem right now. I put a Band-Aid on it. Good. Let's move on. And I know they do more than that too. So if you want to write to me and say bad things, please go ahead. You can just go in the comments section of my podcast. But ultimately, what do you think about that? I mean, I think that when we talk about, the fixer mentality, I think fixers want to fix right away, but that doesn't mean that it fixes the problem permanently. It just means it fixed it short term. Is that part of what you think also is a problem with first responders, or maybe I'm wrong here?
I do. I mean, I do. And I think it's also, sometimes when we're always putting ourselves as the fixer and the solver, it is kind of sometimes compassion disguised as control, right? Because it's like this whole notion of like, Steve, figure it out and feel better. And, I want you to like get everything in a row so that then I can feel better. Right. And so sometimes we go in, even especially with our children, and we're like, oh, well, I'll just call the teacher. I'll do this. Don't get upset. It's fine. Don't worry about it. What do you have to worry about at age 8? It's like button it up, fix it. I want you to be fine so that I can confirm that I'm a good parent, or that I don't have to have this hangover effect of like, oh my gosh, what should I do? And it's hard. It's very hard. But we also are stripping people of this opportunity to get their own repetitions in, to get opportunities to have those processing skills, to build self-trust on their own, and, and sometimes deal with the discomfort of natural consequences so that they learn, they have their own flavor to it. And if you find yourself in conversations with a friend, with your child, with a colleague, with someone where you're like, I feel like I'm having the same conversation with this person every week, and I'm giving them this stellar advice, and they sit there and they nod and they're like, yeah, that's amazing. I should probably do that. And then they don't activate and you're frustrated and you're like, what is going on? That right there lets you know that you're in a serial fixer pattern. You are trying to fix, you are trying to do all the work and grab ownership. And that person doesn't have their flavor. That person doesn't have ownership of their timeline. And that's for you then to emotionally regulate when it's not going against or going on the timeline that you wish. And that's hard, and that requires patience. But you're also working extremely hard at empowering people to go through all the things that it is required to go through to make decisions, to deal with the fallout, to deal with the successes, and build that own internal resilience.
I think it goes with your book about not solving other people's problems all the time. Sometimes you got to serve yourself. My
Mhm.
favorite quote is a good friend of mine who's going to be on again very soon, Pat Rice. I'm sure he stole it from someone else too, but that's just, I give him credit for it. Is take my advice. I'm not using it. I think that that's what I see a lot in the first responder world. They give a lot of great advice, but they don't follow it. And it's great advice short term, but then the emotional hangover, as you talked about earlier, really shows up. I mean, tell me if you agree with me or if I'm wrong, but I think sometimes being able to take care of other people's problems, that's why I became a therapist. I don't have to deal with my own shit.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think that's classic in our field, isn't it? Just
But I think
like,
the first responders are exactly the same. That's why I think sometimes
yeah.
therapists and first responders really get each
Mhm.
other because they're in the same mentality. I don't know. I'm sorry
Well,
to interrupt.
I agree. And it's interesting because it's almost like if we can have external structure, and what I mean by that is like, oh, well, I'm helping this person, I'm doing this is the role I have, and it's all external. It really soothes that critic internally with like, no, 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 you're worthy. People come to you. You solve problems. If they didn't have you, this wouldn't happen. Like you're good. People need you. And you can see where that kind of overlays and really kind of kicks us into this pattern of like, let me look for the next structure, the next role externally, and it bypasses that necessity of having that in conjunction with internal structure, internal validation, internal work. Otherwise, we're left with anxiety. We're left with this disconnect. We're left with kind of that frenzy of finding things that can be our pacifier and our distraction, and it's not a fun cycle to be in.
I think I'm gonna we're gonna lose the audience, but I think you used the right word. It's the pacifier issue. What happens when your binky falls out when you have kids, right?
Right.
I think that sometimes we pacify in order to fix it, but we don't solve it. And I think
Mhm.
that there's a difference between fixing it and solving it. I can
Mhm.
fix something that doesn't mean it's solved.
That's
Uh,
right.
I don't know if that's what you go for in your book, but I certainly that's what I think about fixers is that it's all about like fixing it doesn't solve it for long.
That's right. And I do. I mean, of course, my book Serial Fixer is about, boundary setting externally, but to your point, we have to go internally first and really understand the internal conflicts we have, kind of these protected parts of us, what we are trying to suppress, what we don't want to unlock, what we are constantly medicating in various forms or pacifying in various forms. And I do. That's kind of the whole premise of the book, where this isn't just another self-help, self-care book that's going to give you all these symptoms. I'm like, no, no, no. I want to go down to the root of the psychology around you got to put the hard work in. You got to be consistent. You have to get in an emotional shape. Otherwise, that's not going to steadily transfer into the external roles that we play in our external relationships.
I agree. I think that that's you talked about the boundaries. I think that that's one of the things that comes very clear when you're a fixer. You got to be able to set those boundaries. Is there other pieces of advice that you think that we can get from this book that people really should take away from even our conversation? And not only that, hint, people go buy the book. Where would be also a good part to explain that that's why the book is so helpful.
So I want to just share, I go through a lot of, the whole support don't solve and really break that down. But think about too, just even this week as you're listening to this, your job right now is to not, oh my gosh, I do this, what's wrong? It's let's collect data. So think about the next few times that you're in an interaction, a conversation with someone. And I'd love for you to practice instead of right out of the gate, giving them advice, giving them options, prematurely relating, all these things where you're in fixer solver mode. Start with validation. And validation is, can mean a number of things, but it's basically letting that person know that you are working hard to try to, understand the message that they are saying verbally or non-verbally. So that could be eye contact and a head nod. That could be a statement of like, tell me more. Or, oh my God, it sounds like you've had a hell of a week. It's paraphrasing, it's validating, it's not trying to troubleshoot, solve, fix to alleviate maybe your own discomfort and confirm your own things. But validation is kind of that way that you're at a crossroads and you can become that supporter rather than that solver. And it takes a different level of patience, it takes a different level of energy. But when you start to do that, it's amazing how your conversations become empowering, collaborative. People start troubleshooting with your support on their own. And it's a wonderful thing. And it helps you clear up some space for you to do some of the work that maybe you've never had time or energy or don't even know where to start when it comes to you.
Data collecting is so important. I think that looking at our own reaction to this stuff is so important. So I like that idea. And if you ever need one, I can send one to you. But there's little books, those little black books that you put in your pocket when you're, an EMT, paramedic, police officer, just take quick notes. Grab one for your own thoughts and result, like in your day-to-day life, not only as a police officer, first responder in general, or firefighter, but also like a human being, because I think that that's a good way to look at it. And like, did I try to solve? Did I support? What did I do here? What can I do differently? I don't know if you recommend that, but I certainly do.
Absolutely. And I think too, it can be that whatever flavor works with you, whether you're just, throughout the day collecting data on a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being horrendously awful and 10 being like, I'm on top of the world. Where are you falling? And that can fluctuate in any given hour. But just collecting your data, you don't necessarily have to do anything about it, but just checking in with yourself, taking notes on like, how did I show up? Or did I debrief? Or how did I transition? That's a wonderful way to start building, your case and kind of the foundation of the work that you want to do and the changes that you want to make.
I think that I go back to another thing too, is I have too many guys, particularly paramedics, but I'll put in the other ones, police officers, firefighters. I'm the black sheep. I got the dark cloud. Every bad call comes to me. And whenever I tell them, well, how about you write the data down? And most people do not report back on the data because they don't like the answers that they get from writing that stuff. Yeah, you got a crap day. It happens. Believe me, even as a therapist, I understand there's days I just don't want to talk to human beings afterwards. But I think that that's the other part about data collecting that you talked about. I really feel like, oh, maybe I am not the dark cloud. Maybe it's just how I feel and how I collect my information. I don't know.
Absolutely. You're kind of stuck in that you're using one filter to kind of process your information, and expanding that can be so helpful, and it takes time, and a lot of awareness. I think, Steve, the last thing I'd love to just like share with people too is that analogy. I know I've referred to it a little bit, of that internal balloon, right? It's almost like you have this balloon in your belly, and if you just leave your body and your mind to its own devices, you're kind of in this pattern of like letting your balloon slowly sometimes, or quickly, depending on the day, fill with air. And then you're going to pop. And, everybody's pop looks a little different, but you know how it is. I mean, some days you're in traffic and someone cuts you off and you're like, all right, I didn't love that, but go ahead. Your balloon's not full. But the days that your balloon is full, you're ready to pull over, park your car, get out, and like, go to town with this person. And so think about like ways that you can be proactive in letting a bit of air out of your balloon, and being aware that like when you have a positive exchange with someone, that takes a little bit of air out, and kind of using that as this model or kind of this reference of like, am I going to sleep every night with a full balloon? Or have I worked on some things that are going to let air out and be proactive with it, so that I don't just, hope and pray I don't pop at an inconvenient time?
Well, I think the balloon analogy is something similar that I use. I'll say soda or pop or Coke, depending on what part of the country you're in. I don't want to insult anyone, but I tell people that's the analogy I give about, frustration, emotions that you build up. And if you're on video, you'll see it. I'm making, maybe you can hear it. You shake and you shake, you shake, you shake. And then eventually you say, hey, can you open this for me? And most people I know, it's a Gatorade bottle for those watching. But the point is that you've got to pop that bottle if you're going to do it in one shot. But if you can tap the bottom, open it slowly, it won't spill as much. So you talk about the balloon analogy. I really like that. I used the soda pop Coke analogy to fit in with it, to talk about how to let that stuff go. But as we wrap up here, you talked about a lot of different things. I want to hear more about the book. Tell me where people can find it, where, how can we, what we're going to learn, stuff like that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, the cool thing is that wherever you shop for books, especially online, it should be there. So, you can get it pretty easily. And, if you've kind of caught on to this reference, like this is not kind of a frou-frou, like just like, oh, let's kind of casually magically go through these self-care words. No, like this is a deep dive into the psychology. I play Division I basketball, so I use a lot of athlete references. And, as you can see, just even getting your reps in. And so this book is, I kind of got some heat from my publisher saying, who's this for? And my response was, well, I'm hoping it's for everyone. And they're like, well, that's a marketing nightmare. And I'm like, well, maybe, but I really am trying to write this for someone who's in their 20s, their 50s, any profession, male, female. I don't care, because I want people to be able to use this as a tool. And my whole hope is that people will walk away with this, with things that they can implement immediately and gather data. It's not going to be comfortable, but that you will start to build more of a relationship and be aware of how you show up to things internally that will then help and translate to you regulating yourself, your burnout, your energy, and more importantly, just your relationships.
Well, that's what they want, right? The publishers, the self-help, and what's the crowd, and what really struck me with everything you just said, I think it could go for everyone. I agree with you, but particularly I think about the high achieving people.
Yes,
who need to continue to be high achieving every freaking moment they're alive, instead of like sometimes just being down and being yourself. But I think that would be great. And thank you for letting me know. D1 basketball, that's pretty impressive. Where did you play?
Thanks. I grew up in Indianapolis, so I played at Ball State University, which is about an hour and a half north of Indianapolis.
Well, I hope, we should have opened with that, because everyone would have been listening. But that's quite, like, it being a D1 anything is quite a power keg, if you ask me, especially in the United States. But I think that that's probably where you get a lot of that experience about, the book about serial fixers, breaking the habit from saving everyone's problems or solving everyone's problem, which is your book. So we'll put a link in the show notes so that people can go buy it. And also your website, if that's okay. What's your website?
Sure. LeahMarone.com. And you can find me on social media, but I'd love to connect with you. And if you do read the book, I'd love to hear if it was helpful or if it resonated. So yeah, let's carry on the conversation.
Well, when I get to it, I will definitely let you know. Yeah. But more importantly, this is something that is near and dear to my heart, because I really hope that you can come back at some point, because I feel like I typically have notes, and I don't want to share other people's notes. But this is, without the questions, this is how many notes I took while we were talking, which is usually, like a few lines on the side. This is a lot of notes. So I would love to have you back to talk a bit more about some strategies that people can use, like we talked about, but more importantly, what does it mean to stop solving everyone's problems? Because that's important. But go to read the book. That way we can learn together. And I really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's been wonderful. I think we could have talked all day on this stuff.
I agree. That's why you got to come back.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
So I want to thank everyone for listening to episode 241. And I hope you come back next week and listen to the show then.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.